That casual blind box purchase turned out to be a gateway to a godlike secret. An entire magical civilization was tucked inside. A few drops of cold medicine could vanish a plague, while a handful of breadcrumbs could feed a starving tribe for a decade. A single soda can was all it took to provide high-grade armor for an army of 10,000 miniature warriors. The mystery only deepened as every new box I opened revealed a second, third, and even more thriving miniature worlds. I became the ultimate observer connecting these tiny realms and watching the epic collision of civilizations from my throne above. My name is Silas, and my ordinary life ended the moment I bought a mysterious blind box online. Within 40 minutes, the package arrived. I grabbed my scissors and sliced through the tape, my heart racing with curiosity. What I saw inside left me completely speechless. It was a heavy metal base sealed beneath a pristine rectangular glass cover. It wasn't just a model, it was a breathtakingly realistic landscape of towering mountains and winding crystal-clear rivers. Even more insane, a tiny sun the size of a ping-pong ball drifted through the clouds right inside the display. I watched in awe as the little sun set on one horizon only for a pale moon to immediately rise in its wake. Lights flickered on inside the tiny buildings below. 1 minute in my world equaled an entire day-night cycle for them. I grabbed a magnifying glass and leaned in, realizing with a shock that the world was teeming with actual living creatures. Humans and animals scurried about, but the flow of time was so rapid they appeared as nothing but frantic blurs. As the tiny sky darkened, I reached out to steady the case, intending to use my phone's flashlight to see better. Suddenly, a terrifying, irresistible suction force lunged out and grabbed me. My vision snapped to total darkness. The wind howled in my ears as my consciousness plummeted. Down below by the banks of the Silverfall River, over 100 miniature cavalrymen on tall war horses were brandishing curved blades surrounding 3 defenseless girls. A bald, scarred brute led the group, a sinister and predatory grin twisted across his face. He leered at the bronze-skinned girl in the center. "Hand over the heritage relic, you Valyrian brat. Refuse and you'll spend your life as my foot-washing slave?" The girl drew her short sword, her eyes blazing with defiance. "In your dreams, scum," she roared. "I'll see you all in hell before I betray the Valyrian name." Just as the words left her lips, a bone-chilling howl tore through the sky. The brute froze, looking up in sheer confusion. A blinding pillar of divine light smashed down from the heavens like the fist of a god. Bangs! An explosive shockwave tore the earth asunder, sending horses and men flying through the air like discarded toys. The brute at the center was vaporized, instantly reduced to a pile of ash before he could even process his own death. As the blinding radiance began to dissipate into the air, I stepped out of the massive crater, staring at my glowing form. It wasn't my physical body, this was a divine projection. Looking up through the clouds, I could see my own colossal true self staring down from outside the glass prison. The surviving cavalrymen were paralyzed with terror, shrinking back from a power they couldn't possibly comprehend. I didn't even grant them a glance. I walked straight to the lead girl, who was trembling with overwhelming shock. Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees, raising a delicate ancient sculpture toward me with both hands. The moment I touched the artifact, a flood of foreign memories and ancient power surged directly into my mind. This world was ruled by 3 great families. The girl was Luna, and she held the Ouroboros, the Valyrians' greatest relic. This artifact could forcibly fuse 2 different species, creating a ferocious new chimera that would obey my every command. Leaving such god-tier power in the hands of these tiny, warring mortals was nothing but a colossal waste. I looked down at Luna, my voice echoing like a heavenly decree. "I accept your tribute. In exchange, I shall grant you one request." Luna didn't dare to meet my gaze. "Please, great God," she whispered, "protect my family for 20 years. 5 days for me, an eternity for her. Smart girl." I like people who know their place. Gripping the Ouroboros, I flicked my finger toward the riverbank. A small lizard was snatched into the air and slammed into a soldier's warhorse as a burst of dual-colored light erupted. The horse let out a monstrous neigh as its smooth coat was replaced by jagged obsidian-black scales. Its hooves transformed into lethal claws, and its tail became a spiked iron whip of pure destruction. A miniature drake horse was born, a nightmare creature created by my hand to slaughter my enemies. Before the cavalryman could even hit the ground, the drake's tail snapped out, shattering his spine in an instant. The enemy collapsed into a heap of shredded meat, their survivors fleeing in sheer terror like cornered rats. Gently stroking the drake horse, I commanded it to safeguard the Valyrian lineage in my absence from this day forward. I then transformed into a streak of pure radiance, vanishing into the abyss of the night sky. As my soul re-entered my physical form, my legs buckled under the sudden weight of reality. The interface flickered, confirming the Aureos allowed me to siphon the very essence of the miniature realm's energy. Without hesitation, I pressed my palm against the twin serpent totem glowing brightly on the screen. Vortexes of ethereal energy swirled within the glass, surging directly into my weary body with intense power. Instantly, the debilitating fatigue that had plagued my bones for days was utterly purged from my system. My vitality soared and my pale skin flushed with life as if I'd consumed a divine top-tier elixir. I gripped my hands tight. This mysterious blind box was a literal godsend for my survival. Peering into the miniature terrain, I noted the Ragnar family's desperate struggle for basic sustenance. The Valyrians were short on mounts, while the northern Navars remained indecisive opportunists waiting for an opening. Currently, the Ragnar legions were mobilizing across the river to crush the Valyrian stronghold by force. Having sworn my protection, I plucked a common worker ant from my courtyard to intervene in the conflict. Approaching the glass enclosure, I hovered the tiny insect over the eastern plains near the enemy camp. To the Ragnars, this 2-millimeter ant was now a prehistoric titan of absolute world-ending destruction. The creature impacted the ground with a cataclysmic roar that shook the very foundation of their tiny world. It obliterated their defenses instantly. Desperate Ragnar warriors charged forward with their steel drawn in vain. Indifferent to their blades, the Titan's massive jaws snapped, skewering the soldiers like insignificant insects. Panic erupted throughout the fortress as the air filled with the endless screams of the dying. Through the lens, I spotted an elder on a litter, his gaze fixed not on the monster, but on the heavens. He was tracking my retreating hand, an ancient soul capable of perceiving the divine presence beyond his world. Realizing he could sense me, I shifted my divine gaze toward the unfolding drama in the north. Empowered by the Drake horse, Luna ignored the main front to strike at an unexpected target. She marched 300 elite spears directly into the heart of the wavering Navarre territory. Protected by massive stone fortifications, the Navar lords laughed off such a pitifully small invasion force. Wallace, their greatest champion, stood atop the battlements ready to mock the approaching girl and her beast. The Drake horse exhaled a low growl before launching itself forward like a living scale-covered battering ram. The fortifications groaned under the impact as the heavy timber gates buckled inward from the sheer force. Terrified soldiers rained boulders down, but the stones merely shattered against the beast's impenetrable armor. With a majestic sweep of its tail, the creature pulverized the remaining gate into 1,000 splinters. Rearing back, it brought its massive hooves down with the terrifying force of a falling mountain. The entrance was reduced to dust. Wallace lunged forward, aiming his blade at the monster's throat. The beast let out a thunderous roar, swatting the champion away like a bothersome fly with its tail. Seizing the opening, Luna pinned the fallen warrior's neck with the cold tip of her sword. Victorious, Luna marched toward the central spire to confront the Navarre leader Sylvia and settle their debts. The moment she entered, Sylvia threw open 3 massive chests, revealing a shocking hoard of riches. They were overflowing with refined ores and master-crafted weaponry ready for the Valyrian army to claim. She even added 400 elite warhorses, leaving the stunned Luna completely speechless at the gesture. Sylvia played her hand. She would surrender completely if Luna annihilated the Ragnar family first. Faced with such an overwhelming bribe, Luna had no choice but to withdraw her forces for now. It was a masterful gambit, sacrificing immense wealth to ensure the survival of her entire bloodline. With the room empty, a weary Sylvia collapsed, removing a glowing crystal charm from her neck. In a heartbeat, her youthful appearance faded as her hair turned bone white from sudden extreme exhaustion. The secret was out. She was trading her very life force for the gift of transcendent intellect. I stepped from the balcony's shadows, my eyes locked on the cunning woman. She recoiled in terror, clutching her pendant like a lifeline. As an eerie glow radiated from my form, she felt the crystal within her palm begin to tremble violently. Sylvia's strength vanished. She collapsed to her knees, slamming her forehead against the cold stone floor in total desperation. "Are you a god?" I ignored her, walking straight to the leader's throne before speaking with ice in my voice. "That stone, it belongs to me now." Without a second thought, Sylvia offered the pendant upward with both her trembling hands. I seized the gem, crushing it within my fist. A sharp crack echoed through the silent hall. It shattered, sending waves of pure source essence coursing through my veins. This was no ordinary gem, it was an ether crystal. A masterpiece of condensed energy. I reclined in the throne, casting a cold, piercing gaze down at the shivering woman. "Where are the others? Hand them over." Shaking with fear, Sylvia led me to a hidden vault deep beneath the fortress. Incredible! Hundreds of ether crystals were meticulously organized across every inch of the chamber's ancient stone walls. These sly foxes had been hoarding a literal mountain of fortune right under everyone's noses. As I moved past the shelves, the crystals dissolved into ribbons of light, hungrily spiraling into the palm of my hand. In seconds, hundreds of priceless crystals were nothing but empty husks. I had drained every drop of their power. The raw power was overwhelming. I could feel my very bones creaking and shifting under the immense pressure of the energy. My life tier was skyrocketing. I was breaking through my limits at an impossible godlike speed. Looking at the shivering Sylvia, I crushed the final crystal above her. Shimmering light rained down, soaking into her very soul. Her fading vitality ignited, instantly surging with a renewed and powerful vigor. Wrinkles vanished and her snowy hair turned to lustrous silk. Reborn in her youth, Sylvia stared at her hands in disbelief. "Secure more crystals for me," I commanded, before my projection vanished into thin air, leaving her in the silence. Back in my own world, I turned toward the mirror to inspect the physical changes. I'd grown 3 centimeters taller and my frame was now packed with lean muscle. I felt strong enough to fell a beast. As I snacked, I turned my gaze back to the miniature world where an entire month had already swept past. The Ragnar family was in complete shambles, terrorized on all fronts by the monstrous ant I had unleashed upon them. Their armies were forced into a desperate retreat. Unable to kill the beast, their new leader devised a truly wicked plan. He spearheaded a suicide mission, leading over 100 elite riders into the jaws of death. They left a trail of bait, luring the ravenous giant ant straight toward the heart of the Valyrian family's lands. A classic borrowed sword scheme, trying to play God right under my watch. How bold of you! I reactivated my projection, descending once again like a phantom onto the desolate Ragnar plains. Suddenly, a tiny lion lunged from the tall grass, mistaking me for an easy meal. Its blood-red maw snapped at me. I didn't flinch. My hand shot forward like a viper, catching the beast firmly by its throat midair. With a surge of raw strength, I swung the predator in a massive arc and launched it high toward a circling eagle. The bird couldn't react before the lion slammed into it. My eyes flared as I activated the Ouroboros fuse. Pillars of monochromatic light erupted, entwining the two creatures in a violent, swirling embrace of energy. Through bone-chilling screams, the lion's powerful frame and the eagle's wings were forced into a single terrifying form. As the blinding light faded, a majestic, domineering griffin slammed onto the earth, roaring its defiance. I leaped onto its back, gripping its mane. "Let's go see the show." The creature let out a piercing, thunderous cry. It took flight, soaring high above the Silverfall River, where the bait was already luring the ant toward the water. Their leader actually plunged into the rushing currents on horseback, offering himself as a desperate lure. Riddled with arrows and blinded by fury, the monstrous ant waded into the river, hell-bent on crushing its prey. On the far bank, the Valyrian guards were panicking. Their arrows were like toothpicks against the ant's impenetrable armor. In the final second, a lone rider burst from the tree line. It was him, the veteran commander Ulf. Ulf, the only mortal who could sense my presence. Clad in scarred steel, he charged toward the bank with a massive blade. Just as the gargantuan insect reached the deepest part of the river's current, the old warrior leaped from his saddle, soaring into the sky. He gripped his heavy sword with both hands ready to strike. Using every ounce of his falling momentum, he brought his blade down in a devastating strike against the monster's head. Clang! Could a strike fueled by his very soul pierce the prehistoric behemoth's hide? A thunderous crack echoed. With a desperate roar, the old leader's life-risking cleave slammed into the giant ant's armored skull. His sword blade shattered and curled uselessly. Blood sprayed as his hands burst open from the recoil, sending him reeling back toward the muddy shore. Enraged by the sting, the beast twisted its massive frame, sweeping its limbs like lethal scythe. Defying gravity, the veteran leader twisted in midair, narrowly slipping through those crushing pincers. He struck back. A deep gash sprayed pale ichor everywhere as the monster counterattacked in a frenzy. Suddenly, the ant's jaws snapped shut like a guillotine, catching the old man before he could dodge. Sinking its teeth into his waist, it dragged him into the river as the waters ran crimson. Guy and his cavalry charged forward like men possessed. Their blades bounced harmlessly off the shell, while the Valyrian army watched the slaughter in frozen horror. Nobody expected this silent veteran to show such suicidal bravery. Just as hope vanished, the sky fractured. Astride my griffin, I tore through the dark clouds. A sky-shattering roar erupted from the griffin, a sound that pierced the very heavens. The once unstoppable monster froze, paralyzed by a primal fear it could not understand. It released its prey, flattening itself against the riverbank in a pathetic attempt to play dead. Total silence fell. A divine aura descended, crushing the spirits of every soul present. Lying in a pool of his own lifeblood, the leader stared up at me. "Are you from the heavens beyond?" he gasped with his final breath. I let my essence surge. My voice boomed like muffled thunder. "You spoke of divine punishment. Are you truly ready?" Fanaticism blazed in his eyes as he placed a bloody hand on his son's trembling shoulder. The Ragnar bloodline accepts excellent. It was time to begin. I reached out an invisible hand of God, wrenching the man and the beast from the earth. Winds howled as the river water exploded. I soared into the sky with my new subjects. We vanished beyond the horizon in a flash. Only Guy remained wailing in the dirt. Far away, I prepared the forbidden transmutation. Dual-colored light erupted from the aureos, piercing the sky. I bound the dying man and the beast together, forcing their very atoms to reconstruct. As the light faded, the old leader stood tall. His fatal wounds completely vanished. He stood over 2 meters high now, encased in a nightmare of pitch-black insect armor. An organic bone shield grew from his left arm, pulsating with power. His right arm was now a pair of razor-sharp blades. He dropped to one knee before me. "Thank you for this rebirth, my lord." I tossed him an ether crystal. 2 tasks: find more of these stones and protect the Valyrian family in my absence. Even if your own kin rebel, you will suppress them without mercy. He stashed the stone in his carapace, a cunning glint returning to his eyes. "The world is yours. I will walk through hellfire for your glory, my god." He raised his head, mentioning that winter was coming and his tribe faced starvation. "A single bite of food and my entire tribe will sell their lives to you." I nearly laughed. This old fox was trying to play a god for scraps. But thousands of loyal superhuman laborers for some winter leftovers, that is a steal. Without a word, I withdrew my projection, returning to the real world. How much could 20,000 tiny people actually eat in one winter? I grabbed a bread bag I had just finished. A few crumbs were still scattered inside. Then I found an empty milk carton with a few drops left. To them, a feast. For those tiny souls, this was a feast. I wasn't in any rush to provide more. I needed them to crave my mercy first. Hunger makes the taste of salvation sweet. Time inside surged like a gale. Days later, the veteran leader Ulf returned to his kin. His obsidian armor and miraculous resurrection left the tribe trembling in awe. When he proclaimed that the god was about to bestow a divine bounty, the Ragnar clan erupted. 20,000 souls braved the blizzard, frantically unearthing ether crystals to earn their survival. Within a fortnight, they had harvested over 100 gems for me. The time was ripe. Via Griffin, I commanded them to prepare 2 massive craters for my offering. Through a blinding snowstorm the next day, Guy and Ulf rallied the entire clan. They guarded the frozen pits with bated breath. "The god descends, silence!" Guy roared as the heavens turned pitch black. My towering form eclipsed the sun, plunging the dawnlight plains into an eternal shadow. I gripped the bread bag, aiming it at the pit. One sharp shake, rumble. Golden crumbs rained down like burning meteorites, instantly drowning the 100-man-deep crater. A heavenly scent of wheat and honey exploded, leaving the tiny mortals salivating in desperation. Next, I tilted the milk carton toward the second massive basin. To me, it was mere drops. To them, it was a thunderous, ivory celestial waterfall. Whoosh! The torrent crashed down, transforming the frozen pit into a vast milky sea in seconds. That divine aroma shattered their final defenses. The entire tribe was utterly mesmerized. Heaven's divine manna from the sky praised the God for his eternal mercy. Salvation was here. 20,000 souls fell prostrate, their thunderous cries of gratitude shaking the very earth. With a single meal, I had claimed the absolute loyalty of the Ragnar bloodline. Time accelerated once more, and the winter's frozen grip finally thawed. The Ragnar people hadn't just survived, they flourished, growing stronger and healthier than ever before. Guy dispatched a caravan laden with divine breadcrumbs and aged cheese. They marched into Valyrian lands, demanding elite seeds and farming secrets for their bounty. Luna, the newly appointed leader, was wide-eyed at the sight of food beyond her imagination. She soon realized those brutes had forged their own legendary pact with the divine. Luna's mind raced. If the god was impartial, only the greatest tribute of ether crystals would win his favor. She conceded immediately, surrendering the techniques before issuing a desperate command. Halt all labor, forget the farms, dig for ether crystals, as if your very lives depend on it. This massive mobilization couldn't be hidden from the Navar clan in the north. The cunning Sylvia discarded her veil of secrecy instantly. She summoned Guy and Luna to the Silverfall River for high-stakes trilateral negotiations. Her diplomacy was flawless. With a few sharp words, she forged the first grand alliance in history. She even declared the year of my arrival as year one of the divine descent. Old blood feuds vanished. The Valyrians supplied lumber while the Ragnars provided labor. Meanwhile, the Navars worked overtime to forge iron tools day and night. 3 lords and their people became a united fanatical mining force. They scoured the world for my crystals. Watching those frantic swarms of life below, I couldn't help but smile. Within a single night, my source essence energy surged to new heights. My life tier would transcend within the week. I checked the clock. Nearly 8 a.m., I needed to file for leave and grab a massive tent to shield my secret courtyard. A quick trip would only take a few hours of my time. A year would pass for them, but surely nothing drastic would occur. I boxed their world, locked the gate, and hailed a taxi for the office. I never imagined their ruthless greed would literally cause them to pierce the heavens. Year 3 of divine descent. During August's scorching peak, a Ragnar veteran, Gareth swung his pickaxe deep within a pit for his son. He had been digging for 3 straight days. Then, thud. The iron pick shattered a rock, revealing a bottomless black void. Suddenly, a terrifying force lunged from the dark, seizing the handle and dragging it down. What is that? Gareth's hands trembled with sudden searing pain. Terrified, he scrambled to escape that treacherous deep pit. Suddenly, an eyeless, purple-spotted beast with spider-like limbs lunged from the abyss. Fangs sank into Gareth's calf as his agonizing scream pierced the heavens before he vanished. Immediately following, thousands of purple-skinned nightmares swarmed out. The Ragnars weren't the only victims. From pastures to mountains, every deep crystal mine became a cursed gateway. They became eruption vents for a tide of subterranean monsters. Inside the council tent, the 3 family leaders stared at the corpses in horror. These toxic beasts possessed immense strength and a hunger for any living thing. Most terrifyingly, scouts reported that the entire underground was now their nest. They didn't number in the thousands, millions of them were lurking below. Guy took command. Sylvia armed the warriors, and Luna spent her fortune for the cavalry. They unleashed the elite dragon-scale heavy cavalry, the Drahor's descendants. The Allied forces began a desperate battle to extinguish the flames. 120 armored cavalrymen charged their drake horses, seeing red. They trampled the monsters, but for every 1,000 killed, 10,000 more surged. During a sudden ambush, Sylvia's tent was flipped, protecting her people. The genius leader was bitten. Severely wounded, she nearly perished on that blood-soaked battlefield. Harsh winter arrived, burying the mountains in heavy snow. With food supplies depleted, warriors fought these monsters on empty stomachs. Thousands were torn to shreds, daily casualty reports piling like mountains. Covered in blood, Luna cut down a beast. "God, where are you?" From her sickbed, Sylvia scanned the reports and noticed a chilling detail. The purple-skinned monsters had suddenly stopped attacking the outer villages. Instead, they gathered at the Silverfall River, digging a massive, haunting sinkhole. Guy had already mobilized every elite warrior to strike at the source. "It's a diversion." Sylvia spat blood, screaming for the guards to warn them. "Go to the front, tell the Grand Army to fall back and defend." But it was too late. The monsters were more intelligent than they imagined. While the army was stalled, the real trap was finally sprung. Caverns exploded in the heartlands and the true monster horde poured out. I returned home drenched in sweat. I was gone 5 hours a year for the box. I locked the gate. I wondered how many ether crystals my little subjects had gathered. I lifted the cover and my smile froze. The vibrant green was gone. Now there were only scorched pits and an endless sea of blood. Even without a magnifying glass, I saw the tiny corpses littering the ground. I ripped off the panel, stopped the fast forward, and grabbed my magnifying glass. I glared at the desecrated earth, where swarms of purple-spotted abominations crawled like a living plague. These monsters overran the village like starving locusts, while the great family headquarters were swallowed by roaring flames. A brutal massacre was unfolding, targeting the innocent elderly and children left behind in the chaos. Where were the Griffin and Ulf? These vermin dared to trample my domain after I was gone for mere hours. A cold, murderous fury boiled within my soul, and my knuckles turned white as I gripped my hands tight. The source essence within my veins began to churn with a violent, unstoppable power. My bones cracked with explosive force. They actually dared to lay a finger on my people in my territory. Today you'll witness a true natural disaster. I became a blinding streak of light plunging straight into the miniature world. Manifesting inside the stone hall, I found Sylvia clinging to life, her body broken and her spirit nearly shattered. Leaning heavily on a crutch, she forced herself to remain upright just to deliver her final report to me. It was a trap. These subterranean monsters possessed a terrifying and low-level cunning. They feigned weakness to lure our warriors away, then tunneled into our heartlands to begin their cowardly slaughter. If Ulf and the Drakes hadn't fought to their final breaths, these territories would have been reduced to ash. Even with their sacrifice, the Navarre family had over half of their precious ether crystals plundered by the horde. Sylvia collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she begged for my divine judgment. I entered the secret vault, absorbing all 40 ether crystals she had protected with her very life. My life tier spiked to 24. Pure essence energy roared through my body like a surging furnace. With a flick of my finger, I channeled energy into Sylvia, instantly mending her wounds and restoring her color. "You have done well enough," I said, my voice echoing with a chilling and icy resolve. "Since leather cannot stop these monsters, I shall clad my warriors in the invincible metal of the heavens. Every single bug must be exterminated." With that, my consciousness snapped back into the real world. To purge these pests, I didn't need to go digging through the dirt myself. I shredded a dozen empty soda cans into sharp aluminum fragments, each the size of a small fingernail. This scrap was garbage here, but in the miniature world it was a legendary and ultra-lightweight divine alloy. I opened the glass panel over the Navarre territory and released the shimmering metal shards from above. The earth trembled under their fanatical gazes as 3 massive metal towers glowing with vibrant light descended. They slammed into the ground like falling stars, leaving 3 massive craters in the center of the village. "This is the metal of the gods." Sylvia roared, her voice trembling with awe and newfound hope. Arm the warriors. Thousands of blacksmiths charged the metal piles with wild, bloodshot eyes and desperate hunger. I watched the scene with a cold smile, then turned to grab a bar of milk chocolate. I dropped a massive chunk inside. The brown meteorite crashed down, releasing a heavenly sweet aroma. Sylvia swallowed hard cautiously, stepping forward to taste the mysterious and dark treasure from the heavens. The rush of sugar and caffeine exploded across her tongue, a supreme delicacy bestowed by the hand of God. Feast then slaughter every monster to avenge our fallen clad in aluminum and fueled by the divine gift. The army's morale reached its absolute peak as they launched a berserk and unstoppable counteroffensive. I scanned the battlefield, but the griffin was still missing. Where did that feathered idiot go? I tracked its faint aura to a massive jagged sinkhole located near the banks of the Silverfall River. A few lionesses remained at the entrance, pacing in a panic as they guarded the mouth of the abyss. That bird actually dived into the enemy's lair alone. I leaped head first into the bottomless pitch-black void. The moment I landed, swarms of purple abominations lunged at me like a pack of starving hounds. I didn't bother with skills, simply crushing them into bloody paste and pocketing every ether crystal they dropped. Fighting deep into the cavern, I finally found the griffin trapped in a suffocating layer of disgusting slime. Whatever is hiding in the shadows, show your face before I tear this entire cave apart. I summoned my essence, forming a massive translucent hand that slammed down toward the darkness in the corner. Boom! The slime erupted violently, manifesting its own monstrous hand to meet my strike head-on. Two titanic forces collided in a violent explosion slash, but my energy reserves remained at full power. I crushed the creature's limb with my bare hands, sending a mysterious artifact flying from the wreckage. I couldn't help but laugh at the sight. This supposed underground king was just a tiny purple blob the size of a fruit. It let out a piercing shriek and a massive wave of slime surged forward to swallow me whole. This thing was all talk and no bite. I simply sneered and flicked my finger with total indifference. A beam of pure essence tore through the wave striking the slime's core with a thunderous bang. Its jelly-like body burst into a million droplets as I drained every last bit of energy from the cavern. After rescuing the griffin I attempted a fusion experiment on one of those purple-skinned monsters. I soon realized they were mere puppets artificial beings created by the slime that were impossible to fuse. Back in the real world time within the miniature realm continued to accelerate rapidly. Since war requires endless supplies I used the Urobos to fuse seeds from both worlds into a new crop. I created golden wheat with massive kernels and gifted it to the Valyrian family for large-scale farming. While the fields were being planted, the Navarre blacksmiths worked tirelessly, forging 30,000 sets of heavy plate armor and steel blades. I gave red armor to the Ragnars, orange to the Valyrians, and the Navarre tribe received the green sets. With the army equipped, I decided it was time to turn up the heat even further. I pulled titanium steel weapons from a miniature set including the dragon-slaying halberd and leviathan spear. These were masterpieces of modern manufacturing, crafted with precision far beyond this era. In this age of primitive steel, these weapons represented an overwhelming strike from a higher dimension. I drove the 3 divine weapons into the plaza, and ordered Ulf to hold a grand martial arts tournament. News of the divine rewards spread like wildfire, and the entire world descended into a frenzy. After 10 days of brutal combat, Wallace finally claimed the legendary dragon-slaying halberd as his own. Luna and her brother Tristan, fought their way to victory to secure the Sun-Moon twin blades. Then there was Drax, a commoner warrior, who rose through the ranks with pure, savage ruthlessness. But simply winning the championship wasn't enough to satisfy his burning ambition. He insulted the tribal leader and even dared to challenge Ulf with a boast about slaying gods. Ulf crashed into the arena like a falling meteor, his heavy armor cracking the stone floor upon impact. Drax roared and swung his sword with everything he had, but Ulf didn't even bother to move. He caught the blade with his bare hand and shattered the steel with a single twist of his wrist. A heavy punch sent Drax tumbling away as Ulf mocked his pathetic lack of true strength. Ulf advanced with heavy steps, his murderous intent filling the entire stadium like a suffocating fog. His arm mandibles snapped open, aiming a lethal strike directly for the space between Drax's eyes. Just a fraction of a second before the killing blow landed, I descended from the sky, catching Ulf's wrist with just 2 fingers as the arena fell silent. 10,000 warriors froze in shock, and then fell to their knees in the presence of their god. They chanted their welcome, while I looked down at the broken and trembling Drax. I summoned the Leviathan spear through the air, driving it into the ground right in front of him. I bestowed these 4 divine weapons, with a command to wipe out every monster in the abyss. Without another word, I ascended back into the clouds and vanished from their sight. I slept for a single night, which equaled 18 months of history within the miniature world. During that time, the allied army of the 3 tribes launched a massive counterstrike into the depths. After a year of bloody warfare, they finally cornered the Slime King in the deepest dark of the earth. Driven into a desperate corner, the creature finally unleashed its true chaotic power. Thousands of tentacles lashed out like phantom whips, while Drax held the front line with his divine spear. Meanwhile, the cunning Ulf moved like a silent ghost to flank the beast from the shadows. His twin blades gleamed with lethal intent as he locked onto the slime's glowing vital point. Drax held the line, braving a literal storm of lashing tentacles at the front. The veteran Ulf exploited a gap, swinging his serrated mandibles in a devastating ambush against the beast. Like a living cannonball, he tore through the mass of tentacles with unstoppable, violent force. His blades buried themselves deep within the monster's core, followed by a bone-chilling, earth-shaking scream. The arrogant underground king was impaled through its heart and pinned helplessly against the cold stone wall. This brutal war, raging for over 18 months, finally approached its triumphant end. The 3 tribes stood victorious. After my morning routine, I once again descended into my miniature realm. Harvest season had arrived for the tribes. Atop my majestic griffin, I soared over the land. Near Silverfall River, I spotted Sylvia and her high-ranking officials descending to their knees in prayer. I dismissed the crowd, choosing to stay with her alone. As she prepared a meal over the flames, I infused the fish with a drop of divine essence. One bite of the vitality-infused meat left her stunned, her devotion to me growing even more profound. Climbing back onto my mount, I offered my hand. "Do you want to see the world? Hop on, let's fly." Sylvia froze. She had shouldered the weight of leadership since age 17. For 18 years, she sacrificed everything for her people, never once knowing the touch of romance. Soaring through the clouds, the wind whipping past us, she clung to me in terror as tears flowed. Sobbing with gratitude, she later led me to a high-security aluminum cell hidden within the mountains. Inside lay the broken Slime King, still reeling from the critical strike Ulf had delivered. The creature tried to bolt when I opened its cage, but I pinned it down with overwhelming energy. Just as I prepared to extinguish its life forever, the jelly transformed into a pale blue-haired girl, begging me in human tongue to stop. Backed against the wall and weeping, she wailed about her former status as the underground sovereign. Groomy promised absolute submission if I spared her. I could barely hold back my laughter at her antics. She was merely essence-infused clay, and her terrifying army was nothing more than puppet clones. She only attacked because my mining operations were depleting her precious food supply of ether crystals. Adopting a stern expression, I reminded her that those crystals belonged to me by divine right. "You dared to thieve from a god and spill the blood of my followers." Terrified, Groomy prostrated herself, swearing eternal loyalty in exchange for just a bit of food. Taking pity on the pathetic creature, I tossed her a single piece of silk-smooth chocolate. One taste sent her into euphoria, instantly cementing her status as my most devoted servant. I gave Groomy to Sylvia to serve as a worker. Sylvia proved quite ruthless, forbidding monster creation. Instead, she forced Groomy to produce ether vines, special plants capable of superhumanly strengthening our warriors. Groomy's life became an endless cycle of consuming chocolate soup and churning out magical vines. The once mighty king was now a 24/7 sweatshop worker under Sylvia's unrelenting supervision. Seeing the heavy bags under the poor girl's eyes, I felt a twinge of guilt, but that is the price for crossing my smartest commander. To reward my faithful subjects, I purchased a high-quality miniature city model from the internet. In the 8th year of my descent, thousands gathered as I prepared to reveal a divine miracle. I removed the protective glass, descending my colossal hands through the clouds as I positioned the grand city onto its new foundation. Darkness fell as the sun was eclipsed by a majestic city descending from the heavens. The structure locked perfectly. The mortals trembled, witnessing the sheer scale of their god's hands. Beholding my world-spanning palms, the tiny inhabitants were absolutely paralyzed with holy terror. Tens of thousands collapsed simultaneously, bowing frantically before the absolute power of their creator. Even the arrogant Drax shook in fear, his knuckles white as he gripped his Leviathan spear to stay upright. I granted the 3 tribes joint rule, christening their new home as the legendary Eden City. Using Source Essence, I carved the founders' names into the walls and gifted them 42 proof vodka to spark their society. These natives raised on watery ale were instantly transported to a state of pure intoxicating bliss. Next, I shredded plastic bottles into tiny shimmering fragments to serve a divine purpose. These became unforgeable currency, catapulting this miniature civilization into a brand new era of economic prosperity. Things were too peaceful. Without the threat of death, how would these tiny beings produce the energy I needed? Under Midnight's shroud, I fused a giant moth and a mole using the Uraoros, then planted the monstrosity deep within the enemy tunnels. Months later, as harvest neared, a sudden catastrophe struck the golden wheat fields of the western hills. Massive terrace fields were torn apart from underground, leaving only total devastation behind. Drax and Tristan charged in with divine relics, but they returned hours later broken and drenched in blood. A beast that flies and burrows! Drax spat his teeth, gnashing in frustration from his sickbed. It looks just like the purple-kinned monsters Sylvia arrived with Groomy to investigate the carnage. Drax glared at Groomy, roaring, "This is your doing, monster. Your dark ambition hasn't faded one bit." "That's a lie," Groomy fumed, stomping her feet. "I can't even fly, so how could I create wings?" As they argued, the very earth beneath them began to scream. A violent tremor rocked the entire camp. The ground exploded as a mutated purple monster erupted from the soil, shredding their tents like paper. "Look. See, it wasn't me," Groomy wailed, her eyes overflowing with tears of pure frustration and grievance. Drax only sneered, convinced that the monster ravaging their lifeblood was Groomy's secret weapon. Watching them through the glass, I laughed. That beast had absolutely nothing to do with that poor girl. It was my own creation, a mole-insect hybrid fused by the Uraoros. I called it the Moth Rat. This massive titan possessed lethal claws for digging and powerful wings for aerial domination. The Moth Rat unleashed its blood-stained maw, feasting on the crops, while 20 elite warriors launched a desperate assault. Their spears couldn't even scratch its hide. With a single swipe, the beast sent them flying like rag dolls. Enraged, Groomy unleashed dozens of purple tentacles, trying to ensnare the Moth Rat in a suffocating grip. But the beast was cunning. It snapped the tentacles with raw strength before flapping its wings and vanishing into the deep earth. For months, the Moth Rat waged guerrilla warfare, striking and vanishing. The tribes were pushed to their absolute limits. This forced them to evolve, perfecting their patrols and forging deadlier weapons of war. I was simply turning up the heat. Without pressure, their civilization would stagnate. I needed them to grow. I hungered for more Source Essence. Soon the 9th year of the divine descent arrived. The Navarre craftsman finally unveiled high-powered repeating crossbows designed specifically for aerial threats. Ambushed by the tribes, the Moth Rat was transformed into a pincushion by a rain of arrows. As the people celebrated in Eden City, I watched from above, nodding in silent approval. The survival pressure had forced a massive economic boom, and my Source Essence spiked to C97. After the stick, it was time for the carrot. I raided my kitchen, gathering seeds for tomatoes, cucumbers, and even green peppers. Channeling Source Essence into my fingertips, I infused these mundane seeds with divine energy. They now possessed body-tempering properties mirroring the power of the legendary ether vines. I descended and gifted these holy seeds to the leaders, marking phase 2 of their evolution. Ignoring their worshipful praise, I vanished in a flash of light. My phone alarm was finally ringing. My second Lego blind box had arrived. I hurried to the wall and peered outside. A FedEx truck was idling at the far end of the quiet alley. 6 couriers struggled with a massive crate at my gates. I leaped down, snapping the heavy bindings. I hooked the frame with a single hand, my muscles surging with power. With a roar, I hauled the colossal box into the heart of my courtyard. Tearing away the wrap revealed the familiar glass dome, but the world inside had evolved. The Silverfall River was gone, replaced by an expansive, shimmering blue bay. An archipelago of 100 islands stretched out before me, making my heart race with anticipation. The architecture was unmistakable, a sprawling medieval European masterpiece. On the eastern shores, legions of armored knights clashed in a brutal, blood-soaked war. Their commander swung his blade, unleashing a devastating crescent of pure sword aura. Mages rained down hellfire and tempests from above. This was truly a world of high fantasy. I turned my gaze toward the heavens above. Thick ribbons of source essence swirled in the clouds, yet they slipped through my fingers like mist. Without the world's sacred relic, this divine energy remained just out of my reach. I spotted a mysterious ancient eye emblem on the base, the key to everything. To find the truth, I had to descend. I pressed my palm against the cold metal. My soul plummeted into the abyss. Then, a thunderous crash. Darkness swallowed me, followed by the suffocating stench of rot. I looked beneath me. I had plummeted through a warehouse roof, pulverizing a crate of exotic slimy sea creatures. I ripped a stray octopus from my neck as muffled voices echoed from the shadows. "Justin, you traitor, you swore no one else was after this shipment." A bloated noble spat curses, shoving 2 bags of gold into a lanky youth's chest. Skinny Justin smirked with a merchant's greed. "Baron Wayne, this prize is worth every coin. There is a long line for this beauty." Impatiently, the Baron threw open the wooden lid. My eyes widened. An exquisite elf girl was huddled inside, trembling in absolute terror. I wouldn't stand for this. I launched myself forward like a deadly projectile. Before the Baron could react, my fist buried itself deep into his gut. He let out a pathetic squeal, doubling over like a broken shrimp. As he retched, Justin lunged for the girl. I silenced him with a thunderous backhand. The air shrieked as Justin was sent flying, his teeth scattering across the floor. I scooped the girl into my arms and kicked off the ground. I vanished through the back window, blurring through alleys until we reached the shore. She stood tall at over 1.7 meters with flaxen hair, a vision of otherworldly beauty. Lilia, a timid island elf, explained she had wandered too far from her home. Captured by slavers, she looked down, whispering, "What reward do you seek for my life?" My eyes locked onto her delicate pointed ears. They were radiating pure source essence. "Let me pinch those ears," I said bluntly. "That shall be your reward." Lilia's face flushed a deep crimson as she hesitantly began to lean toward me. Suddenly, I sensed a presence. "Show yourself!" I roared toward the distant rocks. My voice, laced with raw power, caused the ocean to erupt in towering pillars. A battered Justin crawled out, his face a mangled, swollen mess. "Please, mercy," he begged. He had followed us, hoping for a second chance. Justin collapsed frantically, dumping his bags of gold into the sand. "Great wizard, take my gold. Just teach me the secrets of your magic." I nearly laughed. He thought my raw strength was sorcery. I coldly rejected him. Desperation filled his eyes. "Wait, beyond mere gold. I have something else. I hold the secrets of the bay's 4 great kingdoms and the key to the island elves' survival. I'll be your loyal hound if you accept me." A hound, empty words won't earn my trust. Raising my hand toward a distant coastal cave, I clenched my fist with lethal intent. Screech! A bat flew through the air, slamming into Justin's back as I unleashed my internal energy. Explosive black and white light erupted, binding Justin and the creature in a blinding shroud. The world's laws fought back, causing my source essence to plummet in an agonizing drain. I endured the backlash, forcing the fusion to completion until the light finally faded. Justin collapsed, gasping for air as dark veins slithered across his trembling neck. His back arched as massive wings shredded his clothes. Feeling the raw power, Justin bowed in ecstatic devotion. "Master, my life is yours." The transformation was a complete success. In this strange realm, I finally secured a powerful pawn, my own vampire servant. After recording the kingdom's secrets, I found a safe place for Lilia to rest. Reverting to light, I streaked toward my main body. Relaxing on the sofa, I analyzed Justin's intel. This world was split into 4 realms: Storm Thunder, Gloom, and the Silver Moon. The enigmatic Silver Moon Kingdom overflowed with power. The eye-shaped relic was surely hidden there. Sending a fresh vampire to raid the Silver Moon Kingdom was a fool's errand. I required more soldiers. My gaze shifted toward the silent world of Eden City. It was another identical blind box. I wondered what would happen if I fused them together. Without hesitation, I grabbed the base and slowly shoved it toward the Bay world. I aligned the Dawnlight Plains perfectly with the western frontier. Click! I slid the glass panels open. A soft hiss preceded a thunderous boom as the atmospheres merged. The bay's infinite ocean began to surge backward with terrifying force. Seawater flooded the Dawnlight Plains, merging with the Silverfall River as I observed the chaos below. Eastern Prairie laundrywomen were suddenly engulfed by massive crashing waves from nowhere. They looked up at the endless horizon of the ocean and collapsed in pure terror. As word reached Eden City, the leaders of the 3 tribes fell into total chaos. Drax pointed an accusing finger at Groomy, swearing the slime had triggered this catastrophic flood. Sylvia remained composed, slamming the table for order before sending griffins to scout the new sea. Days later, reports of ships arrived. Guy, ever the warmonger, led a group out on rafts to conquer. A single wave crushed them instantly, sending the men deep into the salt water. Without Groomy's silent rescue from beneath the waves, they would have been fish food. For these primitives, attempting a sea voyage was essentially a suicide mission. Descending again, I tossed the memorized blueprints for modern warships onto Sylvia's desk. "The portal will soon shut," I stated, meeting her wide, stunned gaze. "In 2 years, the portal will reopen and foreign invaders will launch an all-out assault. Your survival depends on luck." I vanished in a flash before she could utter a single word. Left behind? Sylvia stared at the complex blueprints, her eyes burning with fanaticism as she summoned her master craftsman. Using my designs, she drove the 3 tribes into a frantic shipbuilding frenzy. Shutting the portal let Eden City evolve independently at a staggering hyper-accelerated rate. Yawning, I headed to bed. The next morning, I checked my phone over a simple breakfast. Browsing Reddit, I saw the blind box community had descended into total madness. An arrogant trending post claimed that pulling mere luxury items was pathetic trash. "Look at my virtual reality console," wrote Leo, known online as Saint Gatling Chatterlin. I glanced at the screenshots, and my breakfast dropped onto the table in sheer shock. Medieval streets and a bustling harbor. Wait, isn't this Headwind Port from the Bay world? Leo was frantically updating his post. "Brothers, this game is insane, real-time pain sensations. The only problem is I don't understand a single word these NPCs say." As he begged for a patch, I studied his screenshots with intense focus. This guy had actually entered my world as a player, using the same device he's the 4th Scourge. I couldn't allow this. A ruler who lets an intruder steal his heritage is no ruler. I tossed my phone aside, stepped onto the platform, and initiated a forced descent. Bang, that familiar crash, followed by the pungent stench of raw fish. I stood up, nose wrinkled. Above me was a fresh hole. Below, more seafood turned to paste. Because I carried the Urabos from another world, I'd smashed into the exact same warehouse. The world's rejection locked my drop point. Outside, I heard the owner's furious screams. I vaulted out the back window and hit the streets. Following our bloodkin bond, I tracked Justin to a grand mansion in the wealthy district. But as I reached the entrance, a massive tower-like brute blocked my path. "You blind, this is private property, get lost." The brute threatened me with meaty fists. I ignored his barking, my eyes narrowing as I read his energy. He had a faint flow of source essence, about the level of a twice-tempered warrior. "You've been popping ether crystals," I said, pointing at his gut. "Don't touch me." Enraged, he shoved me hard. Bang! His dark hands hit my chest, but I didn't budge. Instead, the rebound force sent him reeling back 3 whole steps. He slammed against the wall, grimacing before lunging at me once more. Suddenly, the door burst open. Justin rushed out, crying, "Teacher, you're here!" Justin glared at the brute. "Stand down this instant." Inside, Justin served tea and confirmed Lilia's noble identity and this new residence. I took a sip, grabbed a pen, and began sketching with lethal precision. I slid Leo's portrait over. "Find this man in the port," I said coldly. "Find him and end him. Make it clean." Justin's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He pocketed the sketch. "Understood." Next, I drew the eye-shaped pattern of the relic. Use every resource you have to locate this pattern's origin. Task set, I headed upstairs to check Lilia. Suddenly, boom, an explosion rocked the floor. The house trembled violently as dust and debris rained from the ceiling. My expression shifted instantly. I lunged, shattering the marble tiles as I surged toward the second floor. I became an afterimage. Behind me, Justin unfurled his bat wings and took flight. I kicked the bedroom door in, and the sight inside made my fists clench. Lilia stood barefoot in silk pajamas, her eyes glazed and distant. Her hand was still outstretched, clawing at the void before her. The thick stone wall had been reduced to gravel by a terrifying invisible force. Justin's eyes went wide as he swallowed a lump of pure terror. Is that mage hand? She saw it once and mastered it already. Amidst the rubble, Lilia bowed her head, blushing deeply while twisting her fingers. She apologized frantically, terrified she'd have to pay for the broken wall. "Don't sweat it," I said. With a wave, a surge of source essence erupted. The energy precisely ensnared every single shard of broken brick and tile. In an instant, the debris took flight, reassembling itself into a perfect wall. Reality stitched itself back together layer by layer. It was like hitting a rewind button on time itself. Even the shattered door stood whole again. Justin stood frozen, staring at me as if he were witnessing a living god. He couldn't grasp that for me, wielding source essence was pure muscle memory. Manipulating reality was as simple as stacking building blocks. I turned to Justin, issuing a direct absolute command. "Investigate the rumors regarding the island elves. If the threat is a lie, place a white cloth on your roof. If the attack is real, use a red cloth. You have exactly 3 days. Can you handle it?" Justin snapped to attention, saluting with fire in his eyes. He swore the mission would be completed without fail. Satisfied, I stepped toward the balcony. Transforming into a blinding streak of light, I shot into the heavens. I returned to my physical body, glancing at the frantic acceleration of Eden City nearby. Inside that world, they had already reached the 11th year of the divine descent. The ship blueprints I'd provided were being utilized to perfection. Dozens of warships were drilling on the Silverfall River. Their hulls were armored in silver aluminum cleverly recycled from soda cans. Waterproof, lightweight, and incredibly durable, these tiny blacksmiths were absolute geniuses. As the autumn harvest ended, the 3 tribes stood strong. Warriors were robust, and food was piled like mountains. It was finally time to harvest a massive wave of faith from these unsuspecting souls. I placed my hand on the first metal base, channeling the power of the Ouroboros. Years of accumulated source essence surged from the clouds, rushing into me like a whale inhaling the ocean. My energy levels skyrocketed to the limit. Boom! My internal organs pulsed with a deep, rhythmic vibration. My bones popped and cracked while my muscles vibrated at a terrifyingly high frequency. A shockwave erupted from my body, shaking the courtyard tent. This was a B-rank life-form breakthrough. I exhaled a cloud of impurities, slowly opening my eyes to a new world. My vision was so sharp I could see every ant's antenna without a magnifying glass. Pure God-tier perception. This was a true God's eye view. Feeling hungry, I headed to the kitchen to make a meat-filled flatbread. While eating, I checked Twitch. A player named Leo had just posted a brand new update. The kid had excitedly donned his VR headset, ready to slaughter mobs while driving traffic to his channel. He strolled through Headwind Port's stone streets, capturing every moment. But as he entered a narrow alley, 4 aggressive thugs blocked his path, their faces twisted with malice. Leo tried to curse them out, but without a language patch, his screams were just pathetic, garbled noises. The leader Page picked his ear in disgust before spitting on the ground with pure contempt. "This is the fat sheep Justin wanted," he sneered. His underlings nodded in eager agreement. Without a word, Page drew his blade and delivered a lethal backhand slash. Blood sprayed from Leo's neck as he clutched his throat in a desperate, frantic retreat. Realistic pain flooded his brain before the screen plunged into total darkness. In reality, Leo ripped off his headset and collapsed, drenched in cold sweat and hyperventilating in terror. Trembling, he posted 3 words, "I died." I nearly choked on my flatbread watching the drama unfold. Justin's efficiency was truly terrifying. He really knows how to get things done. Joking aside, I looked back at the Bay world. 30 warships were setting sail with full crews. I checked the signal on Justin's small house. A blinding red cloth covered the roof. The rumors were true, the Storm Kingdom was mobilizing for war. The fleet was massive, led by an absurdly giant flagship carrying 3 powerful figures. The decadent 7th Prince and the ironclad First Knight Nicolas Cage stood tall on the deck. Beside them was a powerful witch. But their trajectory was wrong, they weren't targeting the elves at all. They were sailing straight for the portal boundary that connected our 2 worlds. Damn it, they're targeting Eden City. They must have detected the brief connection between our worlds earlier. From their scouting perspective, we're targets. All their eyes could behold were the pathetic, shattered rafts Sky had once used to navigate the tides. These delusional feudal fools actually believed they were sailing toward a primitive land ripe for a massacre. I reached out and activated the terminal descending into Eden City as a pillar of light rocked the shipyards. Groups of determined youths labored in unison, hauling heavy aluminum plating to forge a massive new warship. War is on the horizon. Are you afraid? I asked. The Valyrian girl looked up, her gaze burning with pride. Fear has no place here. Our Lord provided us with iron and food. Any thief shall find only death. Witnessing their unwavering resolve filled my heart with a sense of absolute supreme satisfaction. I released a fragment of divine source energy into the children before turning toward the central palace. Luna sat upon her sovereign throne, managing the realm. 11 years had passed and she was now 26. The innocence of her youth had vanished, replaced by the sharp, calculating aura of a seasoned conqueror. The enemy brings 30 warships, 5,000 troops, elite mages, and aura-wielding knights, I revealed calmly. Luna's pen stopped mid-stroke. She didn't flinch. Instead, a cold, mocking smirk played across her lips. Lord God, their greatest weakness is their arrogance. They have no idea what truly awaits them. Our superior technology and endless supplies will crush them. In 1 month, the portal shall open. Strike them without mercy. With those final orders, I vanished back into the outside world in a flash. Across the ocean, the storm fleet surged forward their sails, straining as they neared the northwestern reaches. Lenin the wizard clung to the railing, shouting in greedy anticipation, "Look, the promised land is finally here!" The 7th Prince rubbed his hands together, his heart racing with the thrill of impending conquest. The knights abandoned their heavy armor, gripping their blades in anticipation of slaughtering the defenseless natives. Watching from beyond the cosmic barrier, a dark, predatory sneer formed on the corners of my mouth. I gripped the very fabric of the 2 worlds and wrenched it upward. A thunderous roar shook reality. The churning seas surged backward, creating a mist that birthed a colossal, shimmering rainbow across the sky. The invaders stared in awe at the horizon. But as the mist evaporated, their wonder turned to horror. Gone were the wooden scraps they expected. Instead, dozens of gleaming, silver-plated aluminum warships stood ready. Upon the decks, legions of Divine Kingdom warriors stood in perfect formation, armored for total annihilation. Clad in impenetrable helms and wielding refined steel, they leveled massive, heavy crossbows at the intruders. The bolts hummed with a sinister blue light, locked onto the flagship like the cold eyes of death. The lecherous grin on the prince's face froze instantly, his eyes nearly bulging out of his skull. He seized Lenin by the throat, screaming in a panicked, hysterical rage, "Are you blind, you fool? You called this a primitive civilization. Look at them. Does this look primitive to you?" Lenin collapsed, his dignity lost as fear paralyzed him. Meanwhile, the commander's face twisted in pure terror. He unsheathed his massive sword, roaring a desperate command. "To arms, don your armor immediately." The once arrogant knights scrambled in a frantic panic, crawling toward the cabins to find their discarded gear. High atop the aluminum warship, Sylvia watched the chaos with eyes as sharp as a guillotine's blade. Ready, open fire, Wallace's booming voice echoed across the waves, signaling the start of the harvest. The massive winches snapped forward, launching hundreds of arm-thick bolts that shrieked through the air like banshees. The air hummed with the sound of certain death as the projectiles slammed violently into the storm fleet. Their wooden hulls were pulverized like fragile paper, sending lethal splinters flying in every single direction. The knights at the front raised their steel shields desperately, trying to hold back the inevitable tide. The bolts struck with such force that shields and men were vaporized instantly into a gruesome red mist. The first volley alone decimated half the deck, dyeing the surrounding ocean in a dark, sickening crimson. The seventh prince huddled behind a barrel, whimpering and shivering like a cornered animal in a cage. Lenin tried to summon a magical barrier to deflect the steel, but his mana failed him. A jagged arrow fragment tore through his thigh, leaving him screaming like a slaughtered pig on the deck. Cage managed to parry 3 incoming bolts, but the sheer impact shredded the flesh right off his palms. He spun around, roaring at the witch Mi. "Keep them down now!" Biting her tongue, Mi raised her staff high. Behind her, 20 apprentice mages raised their wooden staves in unison, chanting, "O spirits of the tides, heed our call. Obey my will. Tier 8 magic ultra, boiling sea." A titanic surge of mana detonated within the ocean depths. The tranquil waters erupted into a violent bubbling cauldron, churning like a pot of molten steel. Vicious undercurrents morphed into massive whirlpools, tossing the Divine Kingdom's frontline warships like mere toys in a storm. Warriors were sent sprawling as their formation shattered into absolute chaos. Seeing the opening, Cage shouted, "Now charge!" Boarding maneuvers began. Watching this massive display of crowd control within my miniature world, I couldn't help but smirk. This magic system was definitely the real deal. But Sylvia remained unfazed. Stomping the deck, she let out a thunderous command. "Groomy, go!" Deep beneath the waves, the blue-purple slime lurking in the abyss instantly went into a frenzy. Groomy's massive form expanded to its absolute limit, becoming a living nightmare from the deep. Dozens of colossal gelatinous tentacles erupted from the sea like a kraken's arms, crushing the keels of the armored warships. Groomy let out a muffled, watery roar. With a sudden surge of monstrous strength, every tentacle tightened its grip. He yanked the ships from the whirlpools, hurling them back at the storm fleet like projectiles from a giant slingshot. Crash bang. The deafening sound of metal tearing through wood echoed across the chaotic, blood-stained battlefield. Boasting superior hardness, the aluminum-plated warships plowed through the storm ships, snapping their keels like brittle twigs. Death to the invaders? The battle cry rang out as the counterattack finally began. Luna and Guy led the charge, vaulting over the railings and leaping onto the enemy's shattered decks. The Divine Kingdom's warriors fell upon the Storm Knights like famished wolves. Every strike drew blood, every punch crushed bone. Just as Cage managed to steady his footing, a shadow loomed over him, carrying the scent of death. A massive dragon-slaying halberd whistled through the air, aimed at his skull. "Die, you filthy invader!" With his hair and beard flying wildly, Wallace looked like an enraged old lion. Clang Cage barely raised his shield. The solid wood deck beneath him splintered into dust under the weight of that monstrous, heaven-shaking impact. The entire left side of his body went completely numb. He gasped, "What is this insane strength?" A flash of pure desperation crossed Cage's face. He instantly triggered Berserk mode. Meanwhile, Mi's staff glowed with power. Dragonskin Hero's inspiration, Tremor Sense. Magical buffs slammed into Cage as he let out a primal howl. Brain Liberation, Mental Fortification, Steel Bracers. His muscles bulged violently, tearing through his sleeves like paper. Cage's eyes turned a demonic blood red as his movement speed exploded, leaving trails of crimson light behind. He ducked beneath the halberd's swing, his heavy blade becoming a blur as it pierced through Wallace's abdomen armor. Wallace coughed up a spray of crimson, forcing Cage back with a desperate kick before reclaiming his massive weapon. Cage didn't stop. A sonic boom erupted beneath his boots. His skill ground shrink activated in an instant. He closed the distance like he was teleporting. Blade met sword in a frenzy of sparks and lethal intent. With every buff, active Cage's combat power was off the charts, completely overwhelming the 4 times tempered Wallace. "It's over, old man." Cage slammed his shield down, raising his sword to deliver a final decapitating strike. Clang. A heavy Leviathan spear shot across the sky, parrying the death blow with pinpoint lethal precision. The sheer force of the impact split the skin on Cage's hands, sending blood spraying across the wooden deck. His sword nearly flew from his numb fingers. "Can't even kill a fossil!" "Your title as First Knight is pathetic." Drax stood before Wallace with a predatory grin. The suffocating aura of a 5 times tempered warrior exploded outwards. Cage stumbled back 3 paces, his eyes darting toward his slaughtered knights, littering the deck in piles. His heart sank into an abyss of despair. They couldn't win. This battle was a one-sided massacre. These monsters had superior gear and seemingly infinite stamina. Cage turned, barking a desperate command at me. "I'll hold them off. Fly to the capital. Tell them the Storm Kingdom has finally kicked an iron plate." Me gritted her teeth and began a silent, forbidden chant. Cage prepared to burn his very life force. A blinding, bloody aura erupted from his skin. Steel skin, absolute power, like a wild bull, he charged. He slammed into Drax, his shield bracing against the Leviathan's spear in a collision that shook the entire sea. Seizing the split-second opening, a pair of radiant, shimmering wings of light unfurled from Mi's back as she soared. Stomping the deck, she rocketed into the sky, sprinting through the air. "Get down here," Wallace roared, lunging with his halberd despite his wounds. Cage tanked the hit and countered instantly with a 5-strike slash. Sword auras shredded the air, mangling Wallace and slamming him down. Drax's fury exploded uncontrollably. The Leviathan spear blurred. Cage parried, finally unleashing his ultimate severing blade. The explosive sword aura blasted Drax back 10 meters. Cage flipped over the railing, vanishing into the dark, churning depths. Enraged Drax shattered the ship's railing with a single massive punch. Bleeding Wallace watched me escape, his face twisted in bitter resentment. Watching from above, a cold, mocking smirk played across my lips. Mag was escaping when a bone-chilling screech echoed from the heavens. A monstrous griffin dive-bombed her like a high-speed fighter jet. "What is that?" Terrified, she frantically channeled mana through her staff. Shields flared just as the beast crashed violently into her chest. Boom, her magical protection was obliterated by the impact. Mag plummeted, coughing blood, before desperately casting Featherfall to survive. Her descent halted abruptly, hovering 1 meter above the crashing waves. She immediately shattered her enchanted necklace into the humid air. Blind fog erupted, leaving the griffin to claw at the void. Seizing the opening, she dove deep into the cold ocean. Minutes later, she washed up on a desolate, lonely island. Drenched and shivering, she prepared a spell to dry her clothes. Heavy, deliberate footsteps began echoing from the dark woods ahead. Mag's skin crawled as a mountain-like man emerged from the shadows. From the darkness, a pair of murderous eyes locked onto her. Ulf cracked his neck. "Your journey ends right here, little mage. Show me if your magic is worth more than your life." Mag slammed her staff down, activating her ultimate hidden trump cards. The earth liquefied into a deadly quagmire to trap the giant. Massive water whips exploded from the tide, binding Ulf's limbs tightly. Mag then launched a dehydration bubble directly at his stone-cold face. This terrifying spell would suck the life from any living being. It was a flawless combo. I watched with great personal interest. But Ulf was unfazed. Flashy tricks meant nothing before raw strength. He tensed his frame and stomped with earth-shattering intensity. The rocky ground imploded instantly, shattering the magical bindings. With a violent flex, he tore the water whips like paper. As the bubble neared, Ulf simply raised a massive hand. He crushed the spell with raw energy. Terrified Mag tried fleeing. Ulf seized her throat and slammed her hard into the dirt. "Show me your value or die before the gods," he growled. I had been eyeing her dimensional storage trick for a long time. The naval battle ended. The Storm Kingdom's fleet was utterly annihilated. Amidst the wreckage, I prepared to celebrate our first great victory. I grabbed my phone and froze. That streamer Leo had actually posted a new update. This guy supposedly died in-game, yet here he was, respawning like it was nothing. Opening the post, I saw a medieval fishing village. The brat hadn't just survived, he was hiding in an old shack. He was shamelessly filming the fisherman's daughter, trying to farm views even in this foreign world. Good grief, trying to play these low-rent reincarnation games with me? I immediately descended into the bay landing right where he'd been slaughtered. Only a monochrome strand of hair remained. It seems respawning has a steep price. This kid likely burned through his very life force. I sketched a portrait for my subordinate Justin. Track this woman and keep a death stare on Leo. Don't strike yet. We must hold these variables in our palms and toy with them slowly. Orders given, I moved to the front. At the cliff's edge, I channeled 2 blades of pure source essence. With a sharp echoing crack, a massive section of the trunk fell. I hoisted the timber single-handedly and hurled it toward the sea. In one fluid motion, I leaped onto the soaring log. The trunk transformed into a heavy torpedo, screaming across the ocean's surface and carving through the waves. This speed eclipsed any primitive vessel. Within moments, I reached the island held by the Divine Kingdom. The soldiers were gathered around roaring fires, feasting on meat and downing bottles of vodka. Sylvia, the commander-in-chief, approached me immediately to deliver the latest battle report. The war was largely won, but one nagging thorn remained. The Storm Knight Cage had gathered a few stragglers to wage a desperate guerrilla war against our patrols. These water ghosts were elusive, keeping our warriors on edge. I merely raised an eyebrow. For underwater operations, didn't I have a perfectly suited laborer for the job? I entered the next tent where the blue-haired groomie lay spread-eagle, pretending to be dead. She didn't flinch. I manifested an invisible giant's hand and delivered a sharp slap right to her forehead. "Ow!" Groomie wailed, holding her limp arms while complaining that her tentacles were severed and her body ached. I surged source essence into her, manually reconnecting her shattered meridians. The sensation was clearly overwhelming for the little thing, as she melted into slime jelly and clung to me. I flicked her away. "Stop the nonsense. Hunt them tomorrow. Capture them alive, and I'll reward you with a legendary delicacy you've never tasted." At the mention of gourmet food, Groomie's eyes flashed with a hungry green light. She swore a military oath on the spot. Next, the prisoner. With Wolf standing guard like a titan, Mag knelt on the ground, her eyes darting in desperation. Refusing to accept defeat, the old crone began chanting a forbidden incantation under her breath. She stacked 3 detection spells, trying to peer into my soul. I saw her attempt but said nothing. I simply stood there and unleashed the crushing aura of a higher life form. Mag let out a scream. Her eyes turned a violent crimson as tears of blood sprayed out. She collapsed, convulsing in pure agony. An ant trying to gaze upon a sun? She was lucky her mind didn't shatter. "What did you see?" I looked down coldly. Mag's soul was fractured by fear, her voice trembling like a leaf in a storm. "Light. A blinding, terrifying light." She gasped. "Your power is beyond comprehension." I nodded, satisfied. "I find your little trick of pulling items from the void quite intriguing. Show me." Mag didn't dare refuse. Shaking, she traced a circle in the air with her left hand. Through the rippling space, a translucent rift to a dimensional bag appeared. It was overflowing with gold coins, rare gemstones, and fistfuls of ether crystals. As she tried to close the portal, I reached out and clamped my hands onto the edges of the rift. Mag's eyes nearly bulged out. Her logic was breaking. How could a mortal seize her personal dimension? I bared my teeth, my arms surged with power, and the dimensional rift began to shatter. With a flick of my wrist, I shredded the void itself. The dimensional bag detonated, raining treasures and ancient spell books onto the dirt. My bad. I honestly didn't think the fabric of space was that flimsy. I brushed the dust off my palms, eyeing the massive pile of loot. "Consider all of this mine now." "No objections, right?" Me's face turned pale green, but under Ol's terrifying, murderous glare, she could only choke back her tears. Silence meant consent. With the spatial magic secured, I turned my attention to the Storm Kingdom's 7th prince and his wizard Lennon. The prince was a pathetic coward, having already wet himself and passed out from pure terror long ago. Lenin, however, was a clever survivor who knew when he was beaten. The moment our eyes met, his legs gave out. He collapsed into a desperate kneel, crying out, "Great God, I was a blind fool!" He realized the Storm Kingdom had picked the wrong fight. Noticing the divine spellbook in my hand, he knew the situation had shifted. He understood that even their chief wizard had been utterly erased. He immediately pivoted to flattery, groveling at my feet. "Lord God, your army is invincible, but why waste lives on a full-scale assault? Perhaps a different strategy? Sire? Why not use that useless prince? We can put him on the throne as your puppet and control the kingdom from the shadows. We take the kingdom from within without spilling a single drop of blood." I couldn't help but let out a dry chuckle. This traitorous snake certainly knew how to play the game, saving me a lot of trouble. I approved the plan, instantly launching the Divine Right operation. Meanwhile, the perspective shifts back to the turbulent seas. The following dawn, Groomy dragged her battered, half-crippled body onto the patrol warship. Motivated by the rewards I promised, she became a workaholic. Her gelatinous tentacles plunged deep, scanning the abyss like a sonar. Suddenly, she snapped her head up. "Master, there are people hiding below." Right then, the ocean detonated. Massive water whips erupted, lashing around our armored warships and dragging them toward the crushing depths. It was the fugitive Storm Night Cage lurking in the darkness below. Realizing that a clean escape was now impossible, Cage gave the last chance of survival to Quintina. He stayed behind with Grover to cover her retreat. Drax's blood boiled with rage. Gripping his Leviathan spear, Drax lunged into the churning waves, engaging Cage in a brutal underwater duel. Despite the heavy water resistance, their blades clashed violently, kicking up clouds of sand and silt from the seabed. The wizard Grover lurked in the shadows, weaving a steel-binding spell to launch a cowardly sneak attack. But Groomy was faster. Her blue tentacles slithered through the dark water like vipers, coiling tightly around Grover's unsuspecting ankles. Terror gripped Grover as he frantically scrambled to chant a protective shield. It was futile. Groomy's tentacles constricted with bone-crushing force. The sound of snapping ribs echoed through the deep. Grover's skeleton shattered instantly. Blood sprayed from every opening as the wizard's life was snuffed out on the spot. Witnessing his comrade's brutal end, Cage snapped. His eyes turned blood red, ignoring the agonizing wounds covering his body. He unleashed his ultimate high-tier martial art. The Iron Curtain high-pressure air currents erupted from his pores, creating a terrifying, chaotic white vortex beneath the waves. This desperate move burned his very life force. Cage was prepared to die for vengeance. The shockwaves blasted Drax back, forcing him to swallow seawater. Even Groomy's sturdy tentacles were being torn apart. Cage seized the opening, raising his massive greatsword to take Drax's head in one final strike. In that heart-stopping moment, a volley of heavy armor-piercing bolts rained down from the surface above. Our warriors had deployed the shipboard ballistae. The massive bolts hissed through the water, shattering the airwaves. 2 bolts punched through Cage's heavy plate armor, pinning the legendary knight in his tracks. Drax didn't miss the chance. With a thunderous roar, his titanium Leviathan spear lunged forward like a divine dragon. With a sickening crunch, the spearhead tore straight through Cage's stomach, erupting from his back. The first knight fell. Tentacles bound him tight, dragging his broken body onto the deck. From a lonely, distant island, the knight Quintina watched the massive plumes of water rise where her comrades fought. Her eyes burned with grief. Knowing Cage was lost, she led the final survivors on a desperate swim toward home. Little did she know, her escape was exactly what I had planned. As dusk fell on Headwind Port, old Bernie steered his boat to rescue a dying Quintina and her men. Quintina gripped his arm, shoving 50 gold coins into his palms, and demanding to see the Lord immediately. The old fisherman stared at the gold, a fortune worth 7 years of his grueling labor. Terrified, he dumped his cargo and sprinted home, where the player Leo was currently suffering a mental breakdown. Leo sat slumped on a crude wooden cot, lost in his own nightmare. He lashed out at himself, smashing his head against the wall as unbearable agony surged through him. The sensations were terrifyingly real. After 24 hours of torment, he realized he was trapped in this digital hell. Why hasn't anyone found me? If I stay trapped, my real body will eventually wither away and die." With bloodshot eyes, he roughly shoved away the fisherman's daughter as she tried to offer him comfort. On the verge of insanity, he stopped when Bernie burst in with life-changing news. Headwind Port was recruiting laborers for the front lines, offering 5 silver coins a day to fight. Leo seized this news like a lifeline. This had to be the trigger for the main quest line. If I clear this hidden quest, I can finally escape. He bolted toward the harbor's recruitment office. Meanwhile, the dark shadows of impending war loomed heavily over the docks of Headwind Port. The third prince of the Storm Kingdom watched from his ornate carriage, his cold eyes overseeing the battle. Despite her severe wounds, the Knight Quintina stood in full armor, her gaze fixed stoically on the horizon. As the legions gathered, massive warships unfurled their sails to catch the wind. These fools didn't realize they weren't fighting mortals, but a deity watching from the celestial heights. They were merely toys in my palm as I observed this tiny conflict from beyond the glass. Over 30 naval warships had just formed ranks when the piercing wail of a war horn signaled an attack. 5 mysterious warships emerged from the mist, cutting through the deep waters with lethal intent. Leading them was the lost flagship Nicholas, followed by 4 vessels, gleaming with strange, brilliant metal armor. My divine fleet had arrived. On the deck of the Nicholas, the cowardly 7th Prince's knees buckled. Behind him stood my loyal disciples, Ulf and Luna, looming like harbingers of divine destruction. On the opposing flagship, the 3rd Prince signaled nearly 100 mages to unleash their elemental fury. Spells of wind and fire merged, creating a devastating cyclone of magical destruction across the waves. A wall of searing heat transformed the ocean into a sea of fire surging toward my ships. The prince was merciless, seeking total annihilation, yet Ulf didn't even flinch at the incoming inferno. Boom! The ocean erupted into a massive water wall 10 meters high, obliterating the flames instantly. Billowing clouds of white steam hissed into the sky, masking the battlefield in a thick fog. The Nicholas looked like a phantom ship, its water shield secretly amplified by the slime on Luna's wrist. "Master Douglas," the Storm Kingdom's lead pyromancer watched in shock, his eyes widening at the impossible display of power. He couldn't fathom how a single spell could neutralize the combined might of an entire mage battalion. Stunned, the 3rd Prince ordered a table set on deck, masquerading as a gentleman to propose peace. Ulf grabbed the trembling 7th Prince and leaped across the gap onto the enemy flagship. Shaking with fear, the 7th Prince took the seat, declaring Headwind Port was now under his command. In a rage, Douglas flipped the table, his staff crackling with lethal energy as he prepared to strike. Amidst the suffocating silence, the frantic sound of boots suddenly echoed from within the ship's cabin. Desperate to escape his nightmare, Leo brandished a stolen blade and charged the deck like a lunatic. "I am a player, give me a quest," he roared, but he never finished his sentence. Ulf's phantom hand swatted him aside, sending Leo spiraling backward 10 times faster than his charge. With a thud, Leo was smashed into the wall like a bloody mural, life leaking from him. He hoped a high-level NPC would be his ticket home, but he was merely an ant. Seizing the distraction, Douglas launched a ring of fire impact at the unsuspecting Ulf. Scorching rings of fire surged toward Ulf's face, followed by a violent flame strike tornado that threatened to incinerate him instantly. This old man fought dirty, launching 2 lethal pyrolasts without a second thought. Fireballs the size of calves smashed through the wooden deck, obliterating the port side. Splinters and black smoke filled the air while the Navy trembled at the sound of tearing metal. A massive arm tore through the thick smoke as Ulf emerged, his scorched cloak revealing legendary pitch-black monster armor. Terrified, Douglas conjured molten armor for protection, but Ulf wasn't interested in talking. He lunged forward, his right fist descending like a falling mountain. Impact batter. The scorching molten armor crumbled like brittle biscuits. The sheer force of the impact sent Douglas flying back 12 meters. He crashed through the railing before finally stopping, clutching his chest and coughing up blood uncontrollably. Dead silence fell as the locals stared at Ulf, trembling before a literal monster. Ulf calmly dusted off his arm, his gaze cold as ice. "Is this your kingdom's idea of hospitality?" The prince panicked. His plan to use brute force to stall for royal reinforcements had backfired completely. Now his final cards had been played and lost. Even worse, the Divine Kingdom's griffin circled above, raining thousands of leaflets down like winter snow. The treaty terms were now public knowledge. Headwind Port was officially a leased territory of the Divine Kingdom. The prince's attempt to bury the news failed. He could only swallow his pride and seal the concession declaration. From a distant clock tower, King Chayden IX watched in silent terror. Fast forward 1.5 years, and the miniature world had changed. My Divine Kingdom had established an unbreakable foothold within the Bay world. Dozens of warships now traveled between ports, daily amassing a fortune through the trade of golden wheat. As for Leo, the player who dared to challenge me, Ulf's strike had shattered his entire skeletal structure. Now he lay paralyzed in a shack, barely clinging to life. He was completely dependent on others for survival, his eyes rolling in a frozen body. His mind was trapped inside a corpse that couldn't log out my perfect, miserable spy in Headwind Port. Meanwhile, Justin received a crucial new assignment. Ulf handed over the witch mag, ordering her to tutor the elf Lilia. If she passed, the elves would be protected. Mag acted arrogant, at first claiming she had no time to teach talentless trash. But then Lilia performed a flawless mending spell, restoring a shattered vase without a single visible seam. Stunned into a cold sweat, the witch quickly learned to keep her mouth shut. Shifting back to reality, I woke up and rubbed my throbbing temples. My arm muscles were still twitching uncontrollably. Damn this amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The illness was still haunting me. I walked to the glass container, placing my hands on the base. Source energy from the miniature world flooded into my veins. The numbers climbed, finally stabilizing at rank B5. The spasms finally died down. With enough essence, I would eventually crush this terminal illness forever. Witnessing the prosperity of Headwind Port, I decided it was time for a personal visit. I pulled an old white assassin's cloak from my college days out of the wardrobe. Donning the hood, I prepared for my descent. A god must always maintain an air of mystery. I locked onto the coordinates and leaped into the tiny world. Boom! After a chaotic spatial distortion, I landed softly in a forgotten courtyard within the port city. Stepping onto the street, I immediately sensed danger. Dozens of murderous eyes were tracking my every move. These weren't ordinary civilians. I followed their cold gazes until I reached a massive mansion. It belonged to a bitter marquis, the former lord of this territory. From the shadows, I heard his grievances. Losing his land had cut his massive income by 70%. A broken Douglas had proposed a dark plan, hiring shadow assassins from the Gloom Kingdom. They planned to slaughter officials and frame the prince, igniting a total war between kingdoms. A cold sneer curled my lips. Nothing but petty tricks better used as whetstones for the Divine Kingdom's lowly pawns. Indifferent to the fray, I vanished into the shadows toward Leah's estate. Inside the study, Meg's frustration was peaking. She worked in secret, attempting to mend shattered porcelain with her magic. Yet Lilia's effortless perfection eluded her. Amidst her mounting restlessness, I breached the window with a fluid flip. Sensing an intruder, the deputy witch Meg unleashed a lethal strike to defend her pride. Flash, her wand ignited with a sudden blinding radiance. Dozens of pale blue light orbs streaked forward, raining down upon me with relentless force. Faced with such a dense barrage of arcane missiles, I didn't even bother to move. I marched through the bombardment. Bang, bang, bang! The orbs shattered against me in a series of futile explosions. As the smoke dissipated, I casually brushed the dust from my pristine white robes. Not a single thread was frayed. Decent instincts, I muttered. Below, Justin and Lelia charged upstairs, alerted by the chaos. Recognizing the face beneath my hood, Justin's knees buckled. He collapsed, crying out in fanatical reverence. Teacher. Meg froze, her jaw dropping in utter shock as she stood paralyzed. Her legs trembled violently. She remembered me, the one who had effortlessly shredded her dimensional bag 18 months ago. Ignoring the trembling witch, I turned to Lelia. Time is up. Show me what you've mastered. Seeking redemption, Meg frantically cast multiple layers of high-tier magical wards across the backyard. She sealed the perimeter tight to ensure not a single ripple of mana escaped. A nervous Lilia steadied her breath and raised her wand. Force wave, boom! A high-pressure air blast erupted like a cannonball, carving a deep crater into the magically reinforced soil. Debris filled the air, her power already eclipsed elite mages. I nodded, beckoning her closer. Aim for me. Gritting her teeth, she unleashed Fog Cloud. A dense, unnatural mist materialized instantly, consuming my form. She followed up immediately. Oppressive force, boom! A crushing weight descended upon my shoulders. The very air thickened, multiplying in density until it felt like a mountain was collapsing onto me. The earth beneath my boots splintered and gave way, burying my feet in the fractured ground. A masterful combination. Seeing me unfazed, Lilia's confidence surged as she accelerated her rhythmic incantations. The fog condensed violently, transforming into a massive solid sphere of water that entombed me completely. Water prison, Lilia cried, biting her lip before unleashing her most devastating technique. The drowning spell, a truly merciless application of elemental magic. The swirling waters surged with a mind of their own, aggressively invading every sense. Any lesser being would have had their organs crushed by the sheer pressure. I simply closed my eyes. I stood my ground as a descended projection. Such physical threats were utterly meaningless to me. I let the raging currents flow through me, focusing on the fundamental essence of water, fire, and soul. Countless threads of cosmic logic aligned in my mind. Suddenly, my eyes snapped open. The complex laws of transcendent energy conversion were finally laid bare before my consciousness. A slight tremor shook my frame. Bang, the indestructible prison shattered into nothingness. Water droplets peppered the barrier like shrapnel. Lilia shrieked, fearing her magic had caused me to detonate. Meg and Justin stood frozen in disbelief, staring at my perfectly dry, untouched form. Amidst the falling mist, I smoothed out my pristine white assassin's robes without a care. I glanced at the paralyzed Meg. Your demonstration is finished. Now observe mine. I extended my hand, fingers splayed. Whoosh! A roar of white-hot flames ignited within my palm. The searing intensity of the heat caused the very air to ripple and distort. Even from a distance, the heat singed their hair. A mere Tier 1 spell, yet the power was overwhelming. I snuffed the flames. Meg, the Storm Kingdom's premier water mage and fire expert, watched in silent awe. She recognized the true depth of that simple move instantly. For human mages, matching a Tier 3 spell through Tier 1 compression was the ultimate unbreakable wall. Yet the inferno I unleashed with a simple flick shattered her reality entirely. She gazed at me as if witnessing an incomprehensible monster. Retreating to the backyard, I prepared to resume the young elf Lilia's arcane training. Justin arrived with urgent news from Head Windport. That treacherous player Leo who tried to scam me was still breathing. He found himself trapped, unable to log out of this miniature realm. After the divine servant, Ulf crushed his every bone, he was left clinging to a desperate, agonizing spark of life. Now he spends his days begging for a death that won't come. That's the price for playing demon in my domain. Keep the guards on him. As long as he draws breath, his suffering remains my personal entertainment. Justin unfurled 2 ancient scrolls upon the table. One held the relic pattern I'd previously sketched. The other was a crude tactical map. Master, I've located it, Justin whispered with grim intensity. War has erupted between the Storm and Thunder Kingdoms. The Thunder High Priest Saruman is wielding an impossible transcendent power. Eyewitnesses claim his divine artifact bears the exact same eye insignia from the ancient relic. Finally, the trail has gone hot. High Priest Saruman, you're in my sights now. But before the hunt, a promise must be kept. I'd promised the slime a feast for her hard work. Entering the courtyard, I checked on Lilia. The elf girl had been struggling with flight for months, barely manifesting a pair of flimsy, translucent wings. Mag watched with cold disdain, her own solid wings of light shimmering with practiced elegance. She was desperate to reclaim her dignity as a master. I simply didn't have the patience for her ego. My pupils narrowed as I ignited the source essence within my marrow. Life force fused with the roaring wind. Whoosh, colossal wings spanning 10 meters erupted from my spine with violent majesty. Radiant white plumes blazed with blinding intensity, every feather sharp and divine. With one beat, I soared into the heavens. Bathed in sunlight, I descended like a celestial deity, refracting a holy light that scorched the eyes. Compared to my titanic wings, Mag's proud display looked like the scruffy feathers of a plucked chicken. Her jaw hit the floor, her voice lost to shock. "Keep up," I commanded, leading them toward the abyss of the deep sea. We streaked across the coastline, breaching the veil between the bay and the Eden City worlds. Below, the Divine Kingdom's herders watched over their flocks across the endless emerald plains. Mag activated her arcane sight for a fleeting glimpse, only to be struck completely numb. Every lowly shepherd below possessed mana fluctuations rivaling the Storm Kingdom's elite knight commanders. This was the true power of my kingdom, universal transcendence. Ignoring their disbelief, I touched down in the east. Tristan, my quartermaster, was already kneeling in wait. 5 massive, iron-bound chests sat before him. They were overflowing with ether crystals looted from the markets of Headwind Port by my merchant fleets. With a casual wave, the chests shattered. Bang, the treasures within were laid bare. 5 pillars of blinding radiance surged into my palm. My status panel flickered wildly as my source essence hit 39. The sheer rush of harvesting levels like this was becoming a dangerous addiction. "Well done," I noted, ordering Tristan to prepare for the ritual. Meanwhile, I returned to my own reality. I raided the fridge for a special edition 30-centimeter spicy snack I'd been saving for a month. I grabbed a tray of glistening ice cubes to go with it. Looking back into the miniature world through the glass, I saw the massive sacrificial altar had been raised. Tens of thousands from the 3 tribes knelt in unison, eyes fixed on the sky awaiting a miracle. Mag and Lilia watched from the shadows, paralyzed by the mystery of what was to come. The divine bestowal begins. Silence. Tristan's roar echoed, turning the massive crowd into a sea of statues. Clutching the giant spicy stick, I reached through the glass. The very atmosphere groaned as I tore the clouds asunder. A shadow that eclipsed the sun pierced the heavens, casting a terrifying gloom over the world below. With the weight of a falling star, the spicy treat slammed into the wooden platform. Boom! The impact shook the earth. A pungent, fiery aroma exploded outward, drowning the entire kingdom in the scent of a divine, spicy miracle. Never has this tiny realm tasted such an otherworldly flavor. Thousands of tiny noses twitched in pure intoxication before I unleashed the massive ice blocks. Crash, colossal frozen cubes, each the size of a palace, plummeted with thunderous force. The midsummer plains froze instantly as a wave of Arctic vapor swept the land. The venue erupted as the little people prostrated themselves, begging for the gods' mercy. Watching from afar, I stood stunned after dropping mountain-sized glaciers into their sweltering summer. Not even the world's greatest water wizards combined could manifest such a staggering miracle. Realizing I was a true god, Sylvia abandoned all doubt. Meanwhile, that gluttonous slime girl had transformed into a maiden, devouring spicy snacks until her face was slick with oil. With the divine gifts settled, I summoned the high-ranking Sylvia to stand before me. I moved with purpose, circling a large area on the map. "Expand beyond Headwind Port," I commanded. "Forge a fleet of armored warships. Sell our holy wheat and spices to the 4 kingdoms and annihilate any opposition. The Bay world must learn that the Divine Kingdom now dictates the sea's laws. Once I claim the High Priest's relic, the 4 kingdoms will beg to serve us." Task complete. I transformed into light and departed the miniature world. Now it was time to track down the High Priest of the Thunder Kingdom. Peering through the glass, I scanned the darkness for the border between nations. I had to slide the lid back and lean in close to see anything. 20,000 orc warriors marched with torches, their hairy-fanged forms towering over the path. Even from my height, their foul stench and the smell of cheap booze lingered. Leading them was the hunched High Priest, Saruman. I prepared to lock on and descend. Suddenly, a violent itch surged through my nose. I never knew I was allergic to orcs. It was a massive reaction. A deafening, explosive sneeze finally ripped through my lips. To the miniature world, this was a cataclysmic Category 9 hurricane. Violent gales descended like a doomsday storm, smashing into the Orc Legion with power. Orcs were tossed into the sky and crushed into a bloody pulp. Enemy attack. The warrior car roared while the high priest desperately screamed for a mass earthbind spell. Hundreds of priests cast spells, desperately anchoring thousands of soldiers to the trembling earth. Just as they breathed, my nose twitched again. Another massive sneeze erupted. A second wave of destruction hammered down, leaving Saruman pale and trembling with terror. He desperately cast Stone Skin and hurled a fury of air to challenge the storm. His magic was shredded like paper. Saruman coughed up blood and collapsed into his soldier's arms. The sneezing stopped. I shut the glass cover, retreated, and quickly mixed a cup of cold medicine. Back inside, over 1,000 orcs had been obliterated by my mere sneezes. With over 5,000 injured, the Grand Army shattered and fled back to their stronghold. Saruman had vanished in the chaos. I only wanted one person, but I broke an army. Since my target had fled, I had no choice but to enter the world personally. I donned a mysterious white assassin's robe and a hollow mask to look the part. Looking like a max-level enigma, I descended upon the edge of Headwind Port. The moment I landed, a brown-haired youth ran over. "Sir, are you a mercenary? Our squad needs one more fighter." I paused. "A mercenary?" The boy introduced himself as Gabriel. Seeing my silence, he desperately offered me his meager, shriveled purse of coins. The pouch held nothing but a few measly copper and silver coins. "We need this job, but we're short a 5-man party." "Please help us, you'll get your fair share," Gabriel pleaded. Taking the purse, I followed him to a crumbling, rickety carriage. 3 young faces stared back at me from inside the stout Pluto, the pint-sized Simon, and a girl named Jenny. They were just kids, barely 14 or 15. In the world of Bay, mercenaries are ranked by 5 strict tiers: iron, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. These 4 brats only had lowly bronze tags hanging around their necks. Mere rookies who hadn't even begun to touch true transcendence. With wide, curious eyes, they dared to ask my rank. I stayed silent, crushing the silver coins in my fist. Suddenly, my palm erupted with a searing volcanic heat. The metal liquefied, instantly molded by my will into a custom nameplate. I tossed the steaming silver emblem onto the table. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to absolute awe. To them, I was now a god, a silver-tier veteran. Pluto rubbed his hands in greed, but I shut him down instantly. "You 4 haven't even mastered basic tempering yet. Heading to the front lines now is just suicide," I scoffed. Gabriel turned beet red and brandished a royal decree. "The kingdom is in peril. Even if we fall, we must realize our value on the battlefield," he cried out. I internally sneered. The Storm Kingdom were nothing but glorified bandits who had stolen the orcs' territory first. Now that the orcs were retaliating, the king was tricking these naive, sweet children into becoming mere cannon fodder. It was sickening, but I didn't care. I just needed a disguise to reach the front and find the high priest. "The name's Deus." I leaned back in the shadows of the carriage and closed my eyes to rest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we finally rolled into the dusty Gold Sand way station. This was the last stop before the war zone swarming with greedy mercenaries. Suddenly, a chaotic roar erupted ahead. 6 knights on massive war horses rode through the crowd, their spiked armor gleaming with a lethal, intimidating edge. "The Thorns of the Rose. A gold-tier group," Gabriel gasped. I glanced. They were merely at the level of 3-stage tempering. To me, they were just mid-level fodder. However, the 4 rookies were left trembling in their boots. They retreated to their rooms, paralyzed by the fear of tomorrow's slaughter. But sleep was the last thing on my mind. I slipped through the balcony door and vaulted silently onto the rooftops above the sleeping town. Across the rooftops, a specter-like figure waited. Clad in black armor and masked, he looked like a ghost in the moonlight. I approached him, my eyes locking onto the gray emblem hanging from his neck, a platinum tier elite. "You're awfully confident you can run from me," I hissed. The shadow relaxed and extended a hand in greeting. "I am Dylan of the Gravekeepers," he purred. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Lord Deus." I left his hand hanging in the air. "State your business. What do you want with me?" Dylan seemed stunned that I'd never heard of his group, but he quickly regained his composure and got to the point. A man of your power doesn't belong with those bronze weaklings. Join us, and let's reach new heights together. You think you're worthy to stand beside me? I countered. Dylan smirked, ready to showcase his superior skills. With a sudden poof, his physical form dissolved into a cloud of thick, dark mist, vanishing before my eyes. Moments later, he phased back into reality. A few meters away, a smug, arrogant grin plastered on his face. The ultimate skill vanish, Dylan bragged. Only an assassin understands an assassin best, Lord Deus. I analyzed the spot where he stood, sensing the faint spatial energy fluctuations. It was a simple soul power conversion trick. Is that all? I sneered. Before he could blink, my body erupted into mist right before his face. I left nothing behind, not even a trace of my presence. Dylan's cocky smile froze in a mask of pure terror. He stared at the spot I vanished from, swallowing hard. 1 minute passed, then 2. Dylan completely panicked. His petty trick lasted 10 seconds. I had been gone for 2 full minutes and I was nowhere to be found. This wasn't just some elite skill. This was the work of a legendary grandmaster of the shadows. Lord Deus, your powers is beyond comprehension, he cried out, begging me to consider joining his organization. He bowed toward the darkness like a desperate salesman, unaware that I'd already used Void Blink to return home. These flashy little stage tricks might impress the locals, but to me they were nothing more than child's play. The next morning I stepped out to find the 4 rookies looking like absolute zombies from their sleepless night. Get moving, I commanded. The real battle starts now.